KDKR's daily programming do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, yesterday's inflation numbers were just not that good. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it.
Well, if you got a question for me, I want to invite you to go to prudentmoney.com. Great resource. There's a section called the Ask Bob section, and I get questions there quite a few times during the week and would love to hear from you as to what's going on, what's troubling you, what's stressing you, what's working, what's not working. Anything about money and stewardship you want to talk about, that is the place to go. And I do look at those questions. I do answer those questions, and I take that very seriously as a part of the responsibility of the radio show and the ministry of efforts we're involved in when it comes to stewardship. So make sure that you go to prudentmoney.com if you've got a question, and let's talk a little bit about that through the email and however else I can help you. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Yesterday was not a good day for the markets, and it all comes down to inflation. Everything comes down to inflation. It's one of those things where you look at the end of the month and you look at your bills and you go, wow, I am paying X percent more. I'm paying X number of dollars more for my bills. Go to the grocery store. I don't know about you, but literally the last 5 weeks of going to the grocery store, every trip was a little bit more. And you just feel like, am I going to get a break? Sure, gas prices have come down. And that was really at the heart of the discomfort of the markets yesterday. You see, as the stock market was going through the month of August and into September, things were looking better because the market was focused in on oil prices, which affect gas prices. And prices on gas were just falling, making the market feel pretty good about things. Thus, the inflation rate is a combination of all types of aspects of our economy. And if one major component is going down between the last time inflation was reported and this next time, numbers should be pretty good. That wasn't the case. In fact, the forecast came out to be a little bit mild inflation reading, and the markets got to see the type of inflation reading they did not want to see. It was what we call a hot inflation read. Even with gas prices falling, the inflation rate went up. And that was not what the market was expecting, not in the least. You would assume that with the major drawdown on gas prices, that the inflation rate as a whole would be affected enough to go down. But what this is saying is that inflation is starting to broaden across the economy. Don't mean to be the bearer of bad news. It just is the situation that it is. And you've got to remember that inflation in this particular context is a very complicated situation. There's a lot of moving parts. And it's not going to be one of those things where, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, where the Federal Reserve Board just raises interest rates and boom, it takes care of it. And that's the toughest thing toughest thing about it. You get up in the morning and you go, is this as good as it gets? Or how much longer are we going to deal with this? It does get better. It does go away. There's been periods of history where we've seen inflation actually drop like a rock. in just within a year. So it's a matter of making sure that you are being the best steward that you can be with what God has given you. And yesterday we were talking to Chuck Bentley about this, talking about how to inflation proof your life. And one of the things that we talked about was that this is if there's ever been a time in your life that it makes sense to reevaluate your stewardship relationship with Christ, is today. And it makes for a good opportunity to do that. And I've always said, when there are money issues, either personally or as a result of what's going on around us, through the economy, markets, whatever, there is not a safer place that you can be than in God's financial will for your life. There is not a safer place that you can be. You know, we always talk about God's will for our life. I believe God has a financial will for our life as well. He uses money to teach us a lot about what it means to be in relationship with Him. And what an opportunity today to take some of this stress and convert it into a good thing. Like I said, this inflationary period will not last forever. Things will recover at some point. Prices will come down. It's just going to be a process. And that's the one thing that we can't measure is time. We know at some point things will get better, inflation and the costs will come back down, and the situation will come back to pre-pandemic type scenario. Just it's all about time, and that's what we don't have any idea of. Now, what's interesting is that, and I wrote this in a letter to my clients yesterday, that today actually resembles 2008. And let me tell you why. 2008, we had record oil prices. Now, if we have record oil prices, guess what we have? We have high gas prices as well. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the price of oil dropped like a rock. In 2008, it got up to $144. I think it was like $144. If you'll excuse me, I might be off a dollar or so. $144 a barrel. And the price of oil dropped within 3 or 4 months from $144 a barrel down to $32. Once again, I may be off a dollar or two on the price, but a dramatic drop. I think you'd have to admit. We saw the same type of dramatic drop into negative prices per barrel of oil and during the onset of the pandemic, which that's a whole other story. But let's stick with the one at hand. I don't want to digress. And gas prices went way down. And I was following this analyst, and he explained that this was all kind of a political ploy, that the government was able to manipulate markets to the point to where created a sell-off in the price of oil, and the price of oil fell down to $32 because gasoline prices are important, and midterm elections were that year in 2008. And so I watched as, sure enough, the price of gas continue to fall. And that's what's interesting about today, is that if you look at what in the surveys, people's expectations during August were that inflation was falling, inflation was going away. And I thought to myself, don't these people go to the grocery store? But they were fixated on the price of gas. And I really do believe no matter what else is going around, is going on around you, inflation-wise, as long as that gas price is going down, that's the most visible form of inflation, is gas prices. You can rationalize the grocery store a little bit, and you can see where maybe I bought some things this week that I normally don't buy, but you can't rationalize gas prices because they either go up or they go down, and they're everywhere you turn. You see the results of inflation's effect on the cost of gas. So the price, according to this analyst, the price was manipulated. And over 30 years of managing money, I've seen government manipulation in markets several times, numerous times, and that I can see how it's not worth going into the mechanics of it, of how it happened, but the bottom line is that it can and it does, and whether you believe that or not. And in fact, it wouldn't be such a big shocker to believe today with everything else going on. And so the prices went down. I promise you that the day after the elections were over, that next Wednesday, guess what started going back up? Gas prices. Could not believe it. Gas prices were on the way back up, just like that. Are we seeing the same thing today? Because here's the reality is that gas prices were getting out of control. Gas prices were at the start of every newscast, and they were front and center. People were getting aggravated. They were thinking about all the money it was costing to drive their cars, and then they started falling. We're going to step back here for just a second and go to a break, but we'll continue our discussions in a minute. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, PastorChuck.org. At PastorChuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at PastorChuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, PastorChuck.org.
We make decisions every day, but some decisions are harder than others. And when you're unsure of God's will, it can make the process of decision-making difficult, if not impossible. Thursday on Focal Point, Pastor Mike Favarez helps us discover God's will in a new series from 1 Samuel. Be sure to listen Thursday to Focal Point.
.30 a.m. on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Sometimes even our closest friends and family members let us down. So, who can we really trust when times get tough and storms come our way? Thursday on The Verdict, we're continuing our series called What Would You Ask God? By asking a key question for all of us. Why should we trust God? Thursday on The Verdict.
Listen 10:30 a.m. on Bible School Radio 91.3.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know, I do appreciate it. Hey, listen, if you've got a question for me, I want you to go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com, and I want you to send it in through the Ask Bob section and or through email, info@prudentmoney.com. There's also a way that you can get on our texting system if you want to do that too. Just send us an email to get on our texting system. We'll get you, isn't it crazy? We'll get you set up. So that's all at the website, prudentmoney.com. So I was talking about falling gas prices. There's absolutely no reason why. Nothing has really changed to cause oil prices to crater like they have. I think yesterday I saw it at $87 a barrel, was well over $100 worth a barrel back about a year or so ago, or less than that, when the war started in the Ukraine. No reason for that to be happening. So it makes you wonder, is Washington doing something up to their tricks again, doing things to make the price of gas fall? We'll see once these elections are over, because I think that we're going to see about the same thing. So it's worth keeping an eye on. Let's talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve Board. One thing that the markets don't like is that the Federal Reserve Board, this gives them the green light. Hot inflation, we've got to raise interest rates. Now, if you've been listening to Prudent Money, you know that this is a double-edged sword. If they raise interest rates, that cuts off credit, because interest rates on credit go up. That slows down buying and selling of cars. That definitely slows down the real estate markets. I was sent to Mark Pfeiffer, who comes on the program once a month, a text yesterday and said, "Tell me what mortgage rates are doing." And he said he wouldn't be surprised if they were up over 6% today. That was yesterday, talking about today's rates. Now, that over 6%, I think 6% is kind of one of those psychological levels that people could kind of slowing down and going, I wouldn't want to do it at 5.5%, but I could still do it. But 6%, that might be my line in the sand. Might be a situation where I just can't get it done, and that's going to be the extent of it. So we'll see. Interest rates in the markets are going up, and they're going up fast. This is what you do not want to see, because even though it is brought on by the Federal Reserve Board, this inflation we have, as I said earlier, is complicated, and it has a lot of moving parts. Because of that, you can't. It's not like you got a cough and you take some cough syrup. It's like you've got a cough, you've got a headache, you've got a sore throat, you've got the flu, you've got COVID. You got to take a lot of different things, and the only thing that's happening is interest rate hikes by the Fed, which to me is counterproductive. So it's going to take more than just that. I wrote in my letter yesterday to my clients that interest rate hikes are not going to correct the chip supply problem. They're not going to make food prices go back down. So, but the bottom line is, I know a lot of this is negative economic talk. I want to go back to what I said a little while ago. It is also an opportunity to look at your stewardship relationship with God and take a step back and say, am I doing everything I can do to be the steward that God wants me to be? And then let him show you what a real stewardship relationship is like. And the great thing about that is that as God is showing you what it really means to be a steward of what he has blessed you with, and everything you've got, everything I've got, we're all blessed with what God has given us. It also, most importantly, shows what it truly means to be in relationship with him. And as I say this to you, I say this to me. It's a constant reminder. That's the focus. Doing everything we can from a stewardship standpoint and staying in the safest place you can be, which is God's financial will for your life. How about a little bit of good news? Now, besides that was great. That was the best news. Some more good news. How about that? Based on the new inflation data, released yesterday by the Bureau of the Labor Statistics. The cost of living adjustment was, I don't want to say finalized, because it until we hear that number as a final number, it's not finalized. They announced that the cost of living adjustment for the 2023 Social Security payments will be 8.7%. Now, last time I reported this, I said a low of 9-something% to a high of 10.5%. And that was in July. 10.5% was on the high end, and some of the folks who were guessing 9% were incredibly wrong. Maybe not. I don't know. I guess it's such a tough number to come up with. But that means that your Social Security benefit will go up 8.7%, which, it's kind of one of those things where, is it good news? Absolutely. But it's probably not like you're going to have a lot of extra money, because you need that 8.7% to offset inflation, which I believe is running a lot higher than that. I think you'll agree too. I go back to the grocery store because that's where I spend an hour to an hour and a half of my Saturday morning. And I think about, and I guess I'm a price nerd, if you want to call me that. I'm always looking at the prices of things, and I have a memory for prices. And I was just thinking yesterday about a bag of tortilla chips, which, by the way, has gone through shrinkflation, meaning you definitely don't get a full bag of Tostitos anymore. You get like about 3/4 of a bag of Tostitos. But I remember pre-pandemic, $3.99. It was about the high price, the high level of price for a bag of Tostitos. Oftentimes, though, you could get them for $2.50 a bag on sale. Yesterday, because it was Taco Tuesday, and because I was really wanting some tortilla chips, I paid $5.52 for a bag of Tostitos. $5.52. Wow. So, did I ever think that I would, in 20-something years of doing radio, that I'd be talking about a bag of Tostitos and why it was important? But for those of you who love Tostitos, you feel the pain, I'm sure. And that's that. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Please go to the website if you got a question or a comment for me, prudentmoney.com. I do answer those emails. I'd love to hear from you. That's off the website, prudentmoney.com. There were only 3 other times since 1975, which was the start of the cost of living adjustments. Social Security came out in the, I believe, if I'm not wrong, I believe it came out in the early 30s. It took them up till 1975 to realize that these payments needed to be adjusted for inflation. That, my friends, is your tax dollar at work paying those politicians. But the start of automatic adjustments back in 1975 was higher than that 8.7% only 3 times. 9.9% in 1979, 14.3% in 1980, and 11.2% in 1981. And what's interesting is that even though, I guess no, that's pretty much in line. I'll take that back. 1980 was, I think, maybe the height of the numbers or something to that degree, but 14.3% is a pretty big adjustment for inflation. The Social Security Administration is expected to announce the 2023 cost of living adjustments after the release of September Consumer Price Index in October, and I don't believe that that's going to affect anything. So we'll see. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you ever missed a program, have you ever gone to the website or your favorite podcasting platform and listened to the program on your time? Of course, radio is appointment time listening. I think that's what they call it, because the program only comes on at one time on the weekdays. But you can go listen to the podcast at any point that you want to. We do podcast every day, and that can be found on the website and or Apple or wherever you like to get your podcast. So if you do me a favor, just maybe like the podcast and go check it out. It's a great way to stay up on the programs that you miss. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.